Hi, my name is Jessica Orozco, and I'm a student here at Dallas Theological Seminary. I came to DTS to study to be a chaplain. It's not something that I ever thought about doing as I was younger, but after my dad's bout with leukemia and working with my special needs sister for my whole life, I realized that being in healthcare, providing spiritual care, was what I wanted to do. So my husband said, "Pack up, let's go," and that brought me here. So admittedly, there were a lot of things I didn't know about the chaplaincy before I came, and I'm going to address some of those in this presentation for you. There are several areas of chaplaincy: military, prison ministries, corporate chaplaincy, educational chaplaincy, governmental chaplaincy. But that's not where I hope God places me. My heart is for healthcare chaplaincy. I want to work in a hospital. Now, the difference between that and, for example, military chaplaincy has a pretty slim demographic. You're not going to minister to a 7-year-old or her grandmother. Everybody knows why they're there. Most people chose to be there. But in a hospital, that's not the case. Most people land there usually in their worst moments. Sometimes their best, but usually their worst. And the people that I interviewed were quick to point out that you not only minister to patients and their families, you also minister to people like my husband, who was an emergency healthcare provider, a nurse in the ER all through the pandemic, who came home broken and exhausted. You minister to administrators. And don't forget, you also get to minister to housekeeping and food service. Everybody that makes a hospital run. You wouldn't think so. But when I came to DTS, the one thing I was truly ignorant about was how much education it was going to take to actually become a chaplain. I spoke with 3 gentlemen regarding this very same thing, and they all had different answers. But all 3 of them confirmed that most people require a master's degree, certifications, and hours of CPE, which I thought was continuing professional education. But it turns out that CPE stands for Clinical Pastoral Education, and 1 unit of CPE alone usually has 100 hours of clinical time and 100 hours of classroom time. So to be a chaplain, it's no small feat. It takes a lot of education. We've all heard the phrase, "Who ministers to the minister?" Well, it's important. Even as a chaplain, you should get involved with organizations and see what resources are out there to help you support your ministry. And there is no shortage of people that are available to help you, such as the ACPE and the Association of Certified Christian Chaplains. How about the Healthcare Chaplaincy Network, or the American Association of Christian Counselors? You can also choose to find specific chaplaincy resources for your denomination, such as the North American Mission Board has readily available chaplain resources. Get involved. It's worth it. Each of the men that I spoke with had at least 40 years each of pastoral ministry under their belts. That's not a privilege that I've had. And I would suspect that many students, especially young students here at DTS, don't have that experience either. So it was interesting. One of them cautioned that when you speak to patients, you don't speak to them the same way you speak to your church. You don't use overly big words or Christianese. he cautioned that you leave your theological prolegomena at home, and that you speak to these people that you encounter with just real, compassionate words, things they understand and can relate to. And the other man encouraged for us to remember that when you're a shepherd, when you're truly a shepherd, you're going to smell like sheep. You're going to be in there serving amongst the people, just rubbing up against life. Maybe life that looks a little bit different than it does in a squeaky clean congregational setting. So when we discussed ministry boundaries as it comes to healthcare chaplaincy, all three men talked about the safeguards that they put in place to make sure that interactions with the opposite sex never have any hint of impropriety, such as going and getting a different chaplain to minister to that person, making sure that they're always within line of sight and that they're just very careful with their words and how they relate to other genders. But one of my favorite things came up when one of them said, you know, another boundary? Stay in your lane. You're not there to help diagnose or interpret medical orders. You're not a doctor. You're not a nurse. Stay in your lane. You're there to be present and to minister. Before I began my interviews with these gentlemen, I was clear with them and made sure that they both identified as Christian chaplains. Because when asked the next question, I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. I asked them about how they practice self-care, how they keep themselves fit and whole emotionally as they go through their walk as chaplains. Both of them were very clear to say that they had to have a vibrant prayer life, something that was real and daily. One of them said that the advice he got early on was, you can never be emotionally recharged until you're physically exhausted. So he talked about running and yard work. And I'm not positive that I'm going to go that route. But I think that they were both very clear that it was important you had a way to deal with the heaviness that comes with being a chaplain. And what I did like to hear is that one said that every day he prayed on his way home, God, if I'm not meant to take this home with me, please help me leave it at the hospital. Everyone understands how private a hospital can be. I mean, who doesn't know the term HIPAA? We all do, right? But one of the things that I realized in these interviews was that there's something that hospital chaplaincy has that other chaplaincies probably do not. Charting. Everything gets put down so that you can prove that your presence there was actually of use both to the hospital and to the patients. Consequently, you have to be careful what you put in those charts. You don't want to humiliate people or have them read something that will break their trust in you. And all chaplaincies have the situation with, is the information privileged? Can you share? That varies state to state. But in hospital chaplaincy, those charts will always be there, and HIPAA is just a part of life. I thought when I asked the question about concerns in chaplaincy today versus concerns in chaplaincy in the past, I would get hot button topics like the ECMO machines or gender reassignment surgery. That's not what I got, and so I was surprised. What I was told is that the concern for chaplaincy in the healthcare industry today is about the lack of volunteers post-pandemic, the lack of funding post-pandemic. And honestly, all three chaplains that I spoke with We're concerned about how the church is redefining what is sin. If we can't be unified in our churches, it's really hard to minister to those outside of its gates. Thank you so much for taking the time to take part of this journey with me. And in conclusion, I've learned two important things. The first is you can't be a chaplain without compassion. And the second is I have a lot left to learn.